I have drawn so many sacks of flour this week, but I gotta say, I have never learned more in such a short period of time. Talking timing, expression, squash and stretch, secondary action, exaggeration, and other principles of animation. I learned all this by making a little sack of flour animation every single day this week, and on top of that, I made a short film at the end of it where I learned so much on the importance of organizing your animation properly, because I didn't do that at all, but we'll get to that later. So going into this, the only kind of practice I have that would help me for this sort of thing was this perspective study I did with these courses online with ArtWad and whatever else you might find with the other videos on this channel, but not a lot. So it was important for me to just get the feel down and actually drawing a sack of flour, which I definitely hadn't done before. So all I did for day one was just copy down frame by frame from Aaron Blaze, who is a Disney animator. He made a video on animating a sack of flour, and I just went through at 0.25 speed and drew all the frames. And hey, this looks pretty cool, right? But there is definitely something really, really lacking from this. There's a lot of things, but one thing in particular, the timing. I just totally missed out on the easing, and I forgot to keep some of the frames stay on screen for longer. If you just look at mine compared to how his is, I just completely neglected that. So that was a huge thing I wanted to work on going forward onto day two. On day two, I focus a lot more on the timing. As you can see, there's a lot more frames added in as the head finishes its turn. I also had a lot of fun working on the secondary animation. As he turns his head, the little tassels respond to that movement by kind of being a little delayed, like how maybe hair would work or any other kind of secondary animation you might think of. On day three, we added in some squashing and we added in some stretching. By adding in the stretch when he initially jumps up and then the squash when he hits the ground, this added so much more expressiveness to the whole entire animation. By actually doing this for the first time, I realized how important adding these exaggerations or, cheating the anatomy of your subject can be to add this expressiveness to your animation. On day four, I continued to practice this squash and stretch technique with this little jump here, but what I also introduced for the first time was a little bit of storytelling and personality. You can get a slight glimpse into the personality of this sack of flour by seeing how he's sneaking at first, and he gets seen, and then waves arrogantly, and then makes his escape. There's just a little bit of storytelling there. I also really enjoyed trying to do that cartoony, the bottom half of your body starts to walk away as you're still talking or interacting with the person, and it catches up with it. It looks pretty janky, but I think it kind of works in the whole animation. Okay, so now we're on day 5, and at this point I told myself that I was going to reserve day 6 and 7 to make the little short film because I wanted to end this whole week with a bang. So for day 5, I was going to kind of practice and prep myself for that by drawing an interaction between two characters. And honestly, I was pretty happy with how this turned out. However, there is a pretty big issue with this one, and it's focal point. Both characters perform significant actions separately at the same time. So the first occurrence of this is when the front flour sack gets hit by the ball, while simultaneously the back sack falls after the throw. And the second occurrence of this is when the front sack comes up with the ball at the end, and then at the same time the back sack is trying to reach his head up and then slams back down. It's really hard to choose what to look at, and you'll end up having to watch that animation a few times through to catch all of it. Only by doing this, I realized how deep these flour sack animations can really go for your practice. Not only am I learning the basic animation principles, but I'm also learning basics of direction, composition, and thoughtfully planning your sequences. Well, I clearly did not learn that enough because this last project was a bit of an organizational nightmare. As I said, days 6 and 7 were going to be this last final project that was going to be a bit longer and just showcasing everything that I learned this week. This took longer than 2 days. This is more than a week. I lied. Mistake number 1. I didn't plan any of it. That was the only mistake, but it's a pretty big one. So my strategy for this was I went through Adobe Animate, animating the very key frames throughout the story, and then I was just gonna, fill them all in with in-betweens, which is how that works in that one sense. But first of all, I didn't draw that many key frames. There's entire walk cycles I just skip over. There's a whole actions, jumping, I just don't put in at all. I'll fill that in, whatever. But another big problem with this is that while I was doing this, I was making up the story as I went. So this caused me having to go back, change a bunch of stuff, erase frames. Everything was out of out of not working well. And thirdly, because of this, the timing was really screwed up. While there's the one guy in the back mopping the floor, the other guy's, stirring the soup. But the way that I mapped it out, the speed of the guy in the back is not like properly matching how I would also fill in the frames with the stirring the soup, and it just didn't work. I just really screwed it up. The worst part of this is the beginning sequence, which you'll see in a second. As I went through animating these key frames, I was like, maybe I'm doing this wrong. So I started filling in them a little more frequently and like mapping out the actions and planning it a little better. That's why the second part of it is a little better. So here it is. Here's my final product of this week, or a little more than a week, of animating sacks of flour. But overall, while this was definitely kind of a train wreck, I still kind of like it. I'm pretty proud of this. I think there's decent storytelling and personality, and I like the little gags of how they're all falling around and jumping around. It's a fun watch. I also like barely used reference for this, like a few of the walks, and that's kind of it. But it's also probably really evident considering how it's all quite janky. Also, I wouldn't really say this is like a short film, because I didn't add sound or color it, and I didn't fill in the lines well, but it's definitely like a skeleton to that sort of thing. So yeah, if you're getting into animation or you're a pro animator, go animate some sacks of flour. You're gonna learn a lot. It's very fun. Just a sack of flour. You can make it real fun and do all sorts of wacky stuff. Genuinely, like, go do this. It's pretty crazy, actually. Like, it's seriously insane. First time I sit down and actually practice fundamentals, I'm like, whoa, I learned so much. So I guess that's kind of what's happening here, but go do that. It's cool and a lot of fun. That's all I got. That's the end of the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you learned something. I hope you draw some sacks of flour. Have a lovely day. Have a lovely night, as they say.